remarkable story by any stories involving Arthur. This one is an absolute, it's one that it still makes me smile. That's why I'm smiling today.
You're not going to tell me the Stevie Wonder story now, are you?
But funnily enough, Stevie Wonder is part of that story. It's quite a weird way this came about. There was a chap in Darlington, he was clearing out a loft and he found all these old photographs of Darlington Football Club, Darlington Cricket Club. I think there was a rowing or a golf club picture as well or something. And they were covered in dirt, soot, grime, all kinds of rubbish. And he thought, oh, I'll offer this to Darlington Football Club. Next morning, rang up Darlington Football Club. I found an old picture of Darlington, would you like it as a gift? And his response was, no thanks, we've got enough pictures of Darlington. I find that appalling for a football club, truly appalling. However, to use a Darlington phrase, he shot it back into the loft and just thought, bugger it, you know, forget it. If they don't want it, I'll bin it. Some short time later, either the next day or the day after that, I think he'd heard George Boateng on the radio talking about having Stevie Wonder, being on stage with Stevie Wonder, who actually unveiled the very statue I've got today, live on stage in front of 14,000 people. And he thought, Arthur Wharton, I wonder if he's on that photograph. So he went back to the loft, or wherever he'd put the picture, and he had a look, and sure enough, Wharton. So 1:45, I got a phone call from the Northern Echo saying, Shaun, there's a guy who's, and I'm half asleep. Shaun, there's a guy who thinks he's found a picture of Arthur that's never been seen before. And I'm thinking, well, probably not, but, you know. Cut a long story short, we arranged to meet next day at 1:45. Journalist walks in, the back of the picture, not the front. There you go, Shaun. And you know, Howard, as soon as I saw the back of that photograph, the wood was very old, the filth was old, and I knew this was going to be good. Turned it round, he said, I'm going to leave that with you for a couple of hours, just on your own, and I'll come back later. And thank goodness he did, because Howard, I don't cry easily. But you know, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. If nothing else, I unearthed that photograph for football heritage. That means so much to me, you know, because, like I said, despite everything else, that would have been in a bin, in a skip.
Fantastic, Shaun. Tell us about what he was wearing, Arthur, because that's what really intrigues me, and I know it definitely intrigues a lot of school children who we spoke to about this. So just tell us about what he was wearing.
Well, Arthur was wearing what I can only describe as kind of welding gloves, big cuffs that stick out like this. Now, my reckoning is, I mean, I used to play in goal. I actually had a couple of trials for Leeds under-16s and things like that, but I was also a striker. And what I know about being in goal is that it's quite, you know, soulless sometimes when you're in goal and it's freezing cold and all your players are running around and you're trying to keep warm. And I started thinking, well, what would it have been like for Arthur coming from Africa, playing football over here in adverse climes? The ball was incredibly heavy. It was, you know, a very heavy ball. You could also the goalkeeper barge into him, have physical contact. So Arthur must have worn these welding gloves as some form of protection, particularly as he was known, as you know, as the prodigious puncher. He'll have been quite flighty, and when he jumps for the ball, he'll have used those as a kind of shield, really.
I mean, what I find fascinating about that photo is that I've not seen any other pictures from the time of anybody wearing gloves for protection. So Arthur was obviously a bit of an innovator, wasn't he?
Absolutely, an innovator.
And I think round here, you know, it was an iron and steel industry. There was obviously the railway and so on, that probably in Brazil to borrow those off someone, you know, for that sort of protection.